Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Spunkify here on behalf of MMOBomb.com, and I'm coming at you with a very special preview today of Black Desert. Now, many of you are already familiar with what Black Desert is. It's an upcoming sandbox MMORPG that's being developed by Pearl Abyss, but I actually got a special chance to check out the current closed beta ongoing in South Korea, and I wanted to give you guys an early impressions and sort of tell you guys what you may or may not expect from the game once it launches in North America sometime in 2016. So Black Desert, being it's in the third closed beta, it's actually gone through several rounds of changes, which means that it probably will go through a couple more rounds of changes once the game actually officially launches here in North America. So just keep that in mind as we go through this video. Some things you may see are probably will actually get tweaked to sort of better represent a North American or Western audience. Not everything here is final. Not even in the closed Korean beta is this final. We'll probably see changes even as it moves into open beta in Korea in November. So, first things first, what is so invigoratingly interesting about Black Desert? Well, there's a lot of things actually. Starting with, of course, the character customization screen. So, there are 4 classes that you can currently play in the Black Desert closed beta. I believe there are going to be 8 in total once the game launches. And out of these 4 to 8 classes, they are all seemingly gender locked currently. So right now we have the Ranger, the Giant, the Sorcerer, and the Warrior available in the closed beta. Each of these are gender and race locked. So the Ranger is kind of like an elfish woman. The Giant is, of course, a giant, and it's also a male. He's kind of like a berserker, if you will. The Sorcerer is a female that has black magic powers. And then the Warrior is your tank and spank, shield and sword style knight. Later on, we'll have the Wizard, the Valkyrie, the Blader, and the Tamer added. And for the most part, these are their own separate classes. You have things like the Wizard and the Valkyrie, which is kind of like a playoff of the Sorcerer and the Warrior, but even they have their own individual abilities and aren't just direct sort of male or female carbon copies of the other classes. So beyond the fact that these classes are gender locked and race locked, you do actually have a fair amount of customization options available to you with each one respectively. You can change everything from the facial structure with the bone structure, the eye structure, nose, mouth, everything that you could possibly think of is customizable to a degree. I wouldn't say it's as customizable in terms of like making midgets out of giants and stuff like that as you would see in a game like Aeon or even Phantasy Star Online 2, which isn't out in the West yet, but you do get sort of like a level of Eve customization where you can change individual minute details on your characters, and I think that's really what Black Desert excels at the most, is the fact that minute details on characters can be changed to such a degree that you really can spend a long time. I think the character customization was one of the most overwhelming experiences with character customization that I've ever had in an MMO, just because there were so many options. There were so many different ways I could tweak the hair and change if it was frizzy or not frizzy, change individual portions of the hair to change the colors of it. You had a lot of different sort of customization options there, and I don't think anybody going into the game is going to be disappointed with how much you can actually tailor each of your characters, despite the fact there are those predetermined limitations to what race or gender you can select, at least for now, that is. Now, once you actually get into the game, being that it is a pseudo-sandbox MMORPG, Black Desert gives you quite a few options for how you actually progress your character. There's not just the typical leveling system whereby you level up, you gain new skills, new stats, etc. There's sort of like this sub-leveling system going on, much like if you say in Eve, where you kind of just focus on whatever area you want to progress in, and then that is the area that you can innately progress. Now, that being said, there is sort of a pseudo storyline quest line that you can follow, and it all revolves around this black spirit of sorts, which for the life of me I would not be able to tell you what the general storyline is, being that it was all in Korean, but this black spirit kind of provides you with your main storyline quest as you progress through the leveling system. Outside of that, you'll see quests and everything available in cities. You'll just run around, you can see the quest icons available in certain NPCs, and then sometimes just out in the wild you'll encounter a NPC that will have a quest for you to actually complete. Unfortunately, the majority of the quests are fairly straightforward. They're either kill collect quests or discover quests, go talk to this person, go interact with this certain thing, come back to me, etc. There isn't really a lot of innovation there, despite the fact that Black Desert is chock full of innovation in a lot of other areas. Questing really is something that falls pretty short with Black Desert, as it does with a lot of foreign MMOs when they come over to the Western market. Really just their style of progression MMOs just doesn't really sort of line up too much with us here in the West. Now, Pearl Abyss has said that they do intend to listen to player feedback and make adjustments based on that so that it does fit in with a more westernized market, but we don't know exactly to what extent that will happen when it comes to translating the game from Eastern to West. So just keep in mind that is one of the main issues that I have with the game currently, is that the questing system is pretty lackluster in general. In fact, once you reach level 20-ish or so, I have heard from players that questing becomes pretty much useless at that point, mainly the fact that you get a lot better experience per hour just grinding out mobs in area, because a lot of the skills in Black Desert are all AoE focused, so you're able to cleave a lot of enemies really quickly and sort of rack them up, especially if you have a group. So players end up just grinding out levels instead of just opting to do the quest lines, even though the quest lines do reward you with goods. They sometimes reward you with things like gear. A lot of times they reward you with just like little trinkets and what have you that you can use, and they're pretty useful, at least in the early levels, just getting your bearings and kind of figuring out things and figuring out the systems. But it does feel more like a hand-holding thing, and later on the game seems to open up more and become more of just like a go and do whatever. But if you want to progress in the skill-based system, you're going to have to grind mobs or do what little questing there is. Alright, so moving past the questing system, questing is only a small portion of the game. Black Desert has a soft cap right now at level 50 in the beta. And what I mean by soft cap is that as you level up, once you hit level 50, which is the normal cap, you can still gain levels past that. In fact, you can gain levels technically indefinitely just by playing the game. It just becomes arbitrarily more harder and harder to gain the necessary experience to get past that. So 50 is the soft cap, but it can go beyond that. Once you hit level 40, you can create guilds. You can also do PvP. There are no factions in Black Desert, so everybody can PvP everybody else. But there is sort of like this reputation system whereby if you are doing PvP solo and you kill some players, you may be looked down upon by NPCs within certain cities and such, and they may not be able to give you the same kind of rewards. Plus, other players will be able to freely kill you, etc., much like you would expect in other MMOs with open PK systems like that. There is also guild versus guild battles and ability to capture castles and siege them, which is a large portion of the end game available in Black Desert. Really, Black Desert seems to be focused currently on PvP in the end game. There are no healer quests or classes, rather. Everybody's just kind of focused on dealing as maximum amount of damage and kind of just getting in there and dealing damage in the fray and kind of rampaging about, if you will. Which actually brings me a little bit to one of my other problems with how the combat works. Black Desert combat is great. Let me just say it is one of the best combat systems I've seen in the MMO, bar none. I mean, you have a free targeting action combat system with actual weight behind the abilities. It is not this soft lock system whereby you're locking on an enemy and you kind of just do your abilities in an area and you hit them. You do actually have a hitbox, and the enemy can, if you're too large like I was, being a giant, they can actually get too close and you can't hit them because you're swinging past them. So it does take a little bit of time to get used to that. But not only is there this action-based combat, but it also chains with these combos, which allow you to open up a lot of more abilities to use in the fray. And what I mean by that is your action bar has a total of 10 slots on it, but you don't actually get just 10 abilities to use at a time. Those are just 10 abilities that you can use by hitting 1 through 10. You can actually have more abilities, which are just innately learned as you gain skill points and then choose to unlock whatever abilities you want to unlock, but they're all tied to specific combos. So any ability you use is typically tied to a combination of presses between Shift, Spacebar, E, R, and F with left and right mouse button rather. So those all combine to create your specific abilities, and certain abilities, of course, are better for other scenarios than others. And doing those together really allow you to chain them to get a flow, if you will, like a really heavy flow where you deal the maximum amount of damage. But it takes practice. You can only have up to 10 on your bar, but you have a wider range of abilities at your disposal. You just have to memorize what the combination is. So you may have maybe the most complex combos on your action bar, the ones that's really hard for you to execute when you need to. That way you can just quickly use them. But otherwise, you're going to have to use your combination of keyboard presses in order to call up the rest of them. And they really are very flashy. I think, if anything, there's just a little bit too much camera shake in the current closed beta. But it's really great just to see yourself, like, knocking me as a berserker, me as this giant guy. He just jumps around with his 2 axes, just swinging, knocking people left and right, knocking them down, grabbing people and smashing them into the ground. Just, there's a lot of visceral combat. And in fact, even when you attack enemies, blood spurts everywhere. There's blood spatters on the grass. There's actually blood spatter on yourself, on your character, on his like gear and his outfits. So it really just, you know, gives you that really visceral sort of engaged combat feel. However, because of the fact that there are no healing classes, and in fact there aren't any healing abilities, I think, either, it becomes down to a potion spam when it comes to survivability. So every character can sort of dodge and weave around and, you know, get around those large telegraphed attacks that enemies can do, but inevitably you're going to get hit. And right now, the only way that you can consistently regen during combat is by potion spamming. And let me tell you, that is a huge portion of staying alive in this game. A lot of enemies, you're just going to be chugging potion after potion after potion, and it doesn't help the fact that potions have like a 5-second cooldown, so you're almost encouraged to do so. And a lot of quests will give you 10 to 20 potions at a time. So it definitely feels like that is like the current way that they want you to stay alive in combat, and it just feels a little bit cheap, if you will. It kind of feels like they should either rebalance the damage so that you potion only in certain times when you know you're over, you know, the top of your head, or they should figure out a system whereby you're not having to rely on potion spamming just as much. I can definitely see that there would probably be an issue in PvP, just with how much HP that you can regain and how quickly. I mean, it's like getting a heal from a healer every 5 seconds. Some of the more tough, I guess you could say, group bosses, if you will, some summonable enemy monsters that you'll do for certain quests, usually they require a few people to group up to do so, but you can theoretically do them by yourself if you have enough potions, just because you can potion up more and faster than the enemy can deal damage to you. That being said, sometimes they can stun you and they can get a kill off on you, but potions certainly make it a lot easier. However, when you do die, you do lose experience. So just keep that in mind. The game has a hardcore nature to it that if you die, it is penalizing you. You do lose that experience and it's permanently lost. You have to regain that over time. Alright, so you've got your level. There's the basic level that kind of shows, alright, you're level 16 roughly. But then you have these like 3 separate sub-tiered level progression, if you will. There's skill points, there's stamina, and there's contribution points, alright? So skill points are points that you earn just doing combat, completing quests, and these are things that you go to buy new abilities with in your skill tree. You can buy them anywhere, and they directly unlock new combos for you to use. In fact, you're able to just kind of preview how the combo works with a small video. That way you get a sense of how you can intertwine it into your sort of rotation. If you have a rotation right now, I haven't really figured out a rotation, just kind of like whatever's off cooldown and whatever seems to make the most sense to use. So skill points come directly from combat. It's basically, I think, what you would consider the most general sense of progression, in the sense that you use those to directly get more abilities or upgrade your abilities to do more damage. Stamina is akin to labor points in Arcade. That's the second bar, if you will. That second bar in the top left-hand corner, that's the stamina. That is used for things like gathering, for things like NPC interactions, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and that just generates over time. It regenerates over time. I don't think there's an item or anything that you can do necessarily to regenerate it faster. It just kind of happens over time. You get a couple points here and there, and you're able to respend them on gathering or on improving your relationship with NPCs, etc. And then finally, there's contribution points. And contribution points are used primarily for node interaction, which deals with things like creating or building up a house, doing trade routes, doing mining routes with NPCs, and all of that goes directly to that. So stamina and contribution points, they're both kind of like a labor system just split up. Stamina can actually be improved. You can elongate your stamina. You can get more stamina, if you will, by doing certain types of interactions in the world, for example. So you obtain more knowledge to increase your stamina, so you can do more ways to obtain knowledge would be like conversations with NPCs, getting them for quest rewards, exploring different areas around you to obtain landscape knowledge, crafting, hunting monsters, interacting with certain objectives. All those things can increase your knowledge of an area, and by increasing that knowledge, you'll eventually gain more stamina, allowing you to do more actions within that finite amount of time. So really quickly, I'm going to talk about relations with NPCs, because that actually deals with how you do contribution points and how you do crafting. So You can build relationships with NPCs, almost any NPC, just by going up to it and having a separate conversation with it. And by doing this quest chain of conversations, your reputation with them and your relationship with them will increase. And over time, you'll gain access to things like additional quests from them. You may gain a percentage decrease on items if those NPCs are vendors. They may even open up a certain type of item that is only available to you because you've built such a relationship. And these relationships are all based around sort of exchanging stories. And the more people you know in a city, the more people you can kind of create this labyrinth. It almost looks like a constellation star of conversation topics within this grid that overall increase your relationship with that player, or relationship with the NPC rather. And they actually have specific ways to increase depending on the NPC, so you can't just do the same sort of setup every time. It's all based on what that NPC wants to know and how you can go about giving them that information to increase your reputation in relationship with them. I haven't quite figured out completely, mainly for the fact that it's on Korean, but the general sense is how I just explained it to you. And that also goes for the crafting as well. Crafting in Black Desert is probably one of the most involved crafting systems I've ever seen in an MMO, outside of maybe EVE Online. And the fact is that you go to a main town, you set up that as your main node, and then you can go out and explore the world and invest in other nodes, invest in trade routes, or invest in other hubs. And then you set up basically these trade routes between the hubs, and you set your NPC workers that you can hire to go and obtain resources or to trade resources with another town. And it's all based on like an actual economic model. So if one resource is being traded a lot with a town, that resource will go down in price because there's more of or an excess of it in that town versus another resource. So it does create this really thriving economy. And whenever you send NPCs off to do these trade routes and go between nodes, you actually will see them in the world. So NPCs aren't just hanging around waiting for you to talk to them. They're walking back and forth. They're doing their jobs. And in fact, at certain times of the day, at nighttime, for example, they won't even be out. They'll just go to their houses. So if you actually just stand around in a city, it actually looks pretty vibrant, because not only do you have players moving around, you've also got the NPCs as well, and it really gives off a feeling of an alive world, if you will. Alright, so I want to talk about mounts really quickly here. Mounts are in the game. You get your first mount as a donkey through a quest line around level 15, but you can also buy a mount at level 1, saying as long as you have like 40,000 silver or something like that. Mounts are very, very important because this game is huge. The world is huge in the game, and mounts themselves allow you to, of course, move faster. They allow you to pack them full of goods and use them as a travel companion to get things from one area to another. But they can be killed permanently in the world. In fact, when you get off your mount, it stays wherever you get off. So it is like just posted right there, and you have to call your mount back over or get back on your mount and take it to a stable maybe if you want it to rest up, or not get ganked or killed, because it can be killed by random NPCs just out in the space of the world, if you will. And if it's killed, unfortunately, you lose the goods that are on it. So you do need to pay careful attention to your mount, and it's not like mounts in other games which can turn on a dime. These mounts behave like real horses or donkeys or whatever you're riding. They have turning radiuses, and you can actually equip them with armor, and you can equip yourself with spurs and what have you, which will all affect how that mount acts. So it may make them turn faster, it may make them run faster, and each mount has their own individual stats. It has a health bar, it has a stamina bar, and it has like these nuanced sort of individual stats that you can break down between each one of them. In fact, as a mount, as you use a mount, it will level up, and so it'll gain additional stats later on as you continuously use a particular mount. So you get a lot of options there for how you want to traverse the world. Alright, so getting into a little bit of the aesthetics of the game and overall gameplay, I touched on how much the combo felt great when it comes to the action-based combat, the combo system rather, but also the aesthetics of the game. Of course, this is probably one of the best looking, if not the best looking MMORPG that I have seen, bar none to this point. The graphics themselves are really top notch, and we have not only just like the individual character animations, which I talked about, the lighting effects in the game, but the weather system as well, whereby it'll rain, and when it rains, your character will get wet. You can see it glistening off of them. The actual environment will change. It'll leave puddles on the ground, and these puddles will persist for a pretty good amount of time, even after the rain subsides. So you can still see the effects of weather in areas that maybe you weren't even around when it rained, just because there's puddles that your character will splash through as you run through them. Also, just walking through doors, a lot of times there will be buildings in a lot of MMOs where if you walk through the door, you just kind of instance your way in. The door doesn't open, your character doesn't interact with that, or there are no doors, if you will. In this game, in Black Desert, your character will push the door open and move through, and depending on your size, like I as a giant, I actually would duck down in some doorways because I would be too big to normally just get through. So there's just a lot of little small nuances to the animations and to the fidelity of the graphics that really give it off this really impressive sense of immersion. I think that's one of Black Desert's best features of the game currently. Alright, so late game you have the Guild Castle PvP, which I mentioned is sort of like the mainstay of the game. It's sort of your main focus. Outside of that, I'm not too sure what the PvE side is going to entail. Of course, there are open world bosses that you can engage in with other players, and these bosses will drop sometimes special loot for your housing systems, which you can get. You can buy houses in different cities, and that house will sort of allow you to retain goods in that one particular area. You can even buy houses for your workers, which are the NPCs that you use to go and fetch resources and stuff, because that's pretty much necessary in order for you to use the certain crafting benches and whatnot. You have to have those particular style of houses to have the crafting options to craft the items you want. In fact, some of the best items in the game are only accessible by crafting in the late game, so you do need those housing options in order to do that. Overall, guys, I am very happy with how Black Desert is coming along. I feel as though the systems implemented into the game are fairly forward-thinking, despite the fact that the questing system feels archaic, or just your general questing system. I don't think it detracts from the overall other portions of the game that are of note. If you kind of look at a game like EVE Online, EVE Online isn't known for its questing system. It's known for its player interaction and the open sort of emergent gameplay that comes forth with that. A lot of the restrictions removed from Black Desert in the late game seem to sort of echo that style of gameplay, where you have the guild castles, the guild PvP, the focus on crafting, and this sort of trade relationship between players and NPCs just gives it a more of a live and emergent gameplay, and something that's definitely fueled by player interaction and not just a theme park setting. I'm a little disappointed though that we have to wait till 2016, and I'm worried that in that time we'll see other games sort of make up that gap that Black Desert has sort of set for itself, even being in development in 2014. We kind of had that option, or we had that happen with ArcAge, whereby everybody was crazy about a naval combat with ArcAge, which, by the way, there has been naval combat confirmed for Black Desert, but we don't know when it's going to be implemented yet. But we see how much ArcAge has sort of progressed over the 3 years since its initial closed beta in Korea in 2011. And even with its launch now, even with its sort of interesting features that it has, it does feel old in the sense that it feels like a game from a couple years ago. I hope that doesn't happen to Black Desert. I really do. I think it's got a lot going for it. I just hope that they can make some slight adjustments to it when it comes over to the North American audiences to kind of, I guess you could say, smooth out those leveling curves, smooth out the progression for those who like questing in the game, and just present a more thought out leveling progression system, if you will. It kind of just seems like it gets a little bit more hairy around level 20 in the game. Up until level 20, you have a steady amount of quests, but I heard past that point it just really doesn't make sense for players to quest because of how little experience those things give. So that's going to be my early preview there of Black Desert. If you guys want to learn more about the game, you can check out the full profile on MMOBomb.com. We should have maybe some more coverage of the game throughout the beta, which wraps up in just a few more days, and then the open beta later on in November. Hopefully we can get into that as well. Now before I go, I just want to give a quick shout out to Geyer and Arthas. Those are two guys that helped me quite a lot during the closed beta, even bought me my first mount, so thank you guys so much for that. And for you guys watching at home, let me know what you're most excited for with Black Desert and whether or not you think the MMO will be a success here in the West. Until next time, guys, we'll see you later. Spunkify out. Later, guys.